The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
Hey everybody, I hope you had a great weekend, and wow, I honestly I decided to kind of wait a couple days after doing part 1, part 2 and part 3. And if you are listening to this right now and you haven't listened to those, honestly, like I said before, I think you should really stop listening to part 4, go back and give those a listen so you can have the context of that for what we're going to talk about today. And this is going to be part 4 of the situation in Israel and Palestine. Again, we're going to refer to it as Palestine, even though, as we've established in part 1, it is no longer formally recognized as a country. And I'll be honest, I ended up, deciding to take a couple days and just see what happens with all of this, mainly because this is so hard to keep up with. It really is. There is news and events coming out, gosh, what feels like on the hour, if not on the minute. And as part of that, there's also, there's information and there's misinformation. Oh my God, we've talked about this a lot on multiple episodes. And, unfortunately, we live in the age of we live in the age of information, but we truly live in the age of misinformation. And so many things that, were reported on initially seem to have been totally debunked. And we're going to talk about a couple of those. And they're the ones that, really, I feel like they're the fire starters. And, now they're seemingly being debunked. So, that's just not cool. That's not cool. There are a few things, and again, I'm gonna get into this soon. I wanna give you some context before we go there. But anyway, what I'm gonna try and do today is do a little bit of a continuation on, all the things we talked about in part 1, part 2, and part 3. We're gonna really delve into, the disconnect that, to me, really, I still can't figure out. I can't figure out the disconnect between why the folks on the Democratic side do not seem to be supporting Israel. Although I will say, and I did have a friend point this out, obviously Joe Biden is coming out with a strong stance, against Hamas and standing with Israel and all that. But again, like I said, he's seemingly the only major voice on the Democratic side. I don't hear anything from Nancy Pelosi. I don't hear anything from Gavin Newsom. I don't hear anything from Adam Schiff. Those are all California-based legislators. I don't hear anything from, gosh, who are other big people in Democratic Party? I mean, even the minority Senate leader, Hakeem Jeffries, I don't hear anything from him. You know, I'll tell you who I do hear from. It's the Republicans, the Republican leadership, the Republican influencers, people like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk. And by the way, these two guys, I mean, they're despised by the Democratic base. They're despised by liberals. I mean, Charlie Kirk in particular, he's a sharp guy. I didn't realize he was so young. He's only 30 or he's turning 30. But I mean, this guy goes on college campuses and literally just like gets yelled at by the liberal base at those campuses, which, by the way, we are going to talk about what's going on college campuses. And even that confuses me a little bit. But these guys, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, there's several others, even Sean Hannity on Fox. These guys are hated by the liberal base. They're hated by, I always say my friends, and by the way, everybody's my friend. I like to state that. But these guys are hated. But now they're the ones championing the very people that hate them's cause. Seriously, that's interesting. Who else? God, Megyn Kelly, who's a big voice on Fox. But what's crazy is all of my friends, and again, I also took some time because I really did try to define out this disconnect. And here it is. So my friends who are liberal Democrats and who stand with Israel right now, they are being represented by the Republican leadership that, quite frankly, I know they loathe. Okay. And we'll run this all the way to the top to Donald J. Trump. So, like, I've got a couple friends I'm not going to mention. One in particular, I'm not going to mention his name because I didn't ask him. By the way, normally I ask my friends if they're okay if I drop their name, and the ones that say yes, I do. The ones that say, hey, I prefer you not, I don't. So I didn't get to ask him. He might even be cool with it, but I know this guy loathes Trump, and he's probably figuring out that I'm talking about him right now, which will be funny. I'll see if I get a note from him. But in this situation, the question becomes, will he or can he say, you know what? I respect Trump for what he's doing and what he's standing with Israel after 3 or maybe 7 years of loathing him? I don't know. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm not going to judge it one way or the other because, like I said, I think that visceral hate of Trump is so deep and, to me, inexplainable in many ways. But that is a perfect analogy of the disconnect that I'm talking about, which is the Democratic base of constituency. Quite frankly, their voice is being magnified by Republican leadership, not by Democratic leadership. So anyway, that's interesting. The other people I hear from are the Democrats, but it's the progressive wing of the Democrats. So, the squad. And really, the leader of the squad is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which I'm going to play another clip from her in a little bit. But even Bernie Sanders, I've got some details on him that I'm going to share. And they are, again, I'm not going to say they're pro-Hamas because I don't think anybody's pro-terrorist, but they're definitely not I stand with Israel. They're not putting the frame on their Facebook profile if they can even find the frame, as I've shared in the previous episode. So this disconnect is just, it's odd to me. And like I said, if there's anybody that feels like they can explain why there is a disconnect between the Democratic leadership and Democratic celebrity base. And, I did have one friend say, who cares what the celebrity thinks? And it's the same friend who literally is an echo chamber for everything celebrity thinks. And I told him, I go, dude, you're such a hypocrite. Like, you're an echo chamber for the past 3 years. If a celebrity said, get vaccinated, you're the first person that would scream that from the top of the mountains. And you know what? I love my friendships because we can talk like that. And he literally goes, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right about that. And we get a good laugh about it. All right, so the first clip I want to play this is Michael McCaul. He's the chair of the U.S. Foreign Affairs Committee. So again, like a big dude with a big job who's dialed into all that is happening when it comes to foreign affairs. So he went on record on Friday saying that Egypt actually warned Israel of this 3 days later. Give this a listen. 3 days prior, sorry.
We heard from the administration. There seems to have been a failure of intelligence as well. We're not quite sure how we missed it. We're not quite sure how Israel missed it. We know that Egypt had warned the Israelis 3 days prior that an event like this could happen. We know that this had been planned perhaps as long as a year ago.
All right. Again, I mean, this is a legit dude. This is not a journalist or a broadcaster or someone on TikTok. This is the head of the U.S. Foreign Committee. And, the fact that he's saying Egypt warned Israel 3 days ago, the fact that he's saying we've known about this for a year. I mean, that's insane. I know that it's one of my favorite sayings, but it really is, And again, you couple that with when you talk about intelligence for Israel as well as intelligence for the United States, you're talking about the CIA for the United States and an organization called Mossad for Israel, which, both of those guys are like 5-star organizations. I mean, that's like the best of the best. Okay, now, so I brought up Charlie Kirk earlier. Again, if you don't know who he is a very, very popular conservative Republican. I don't know if he's Jewish or not. I don't think he is, but he is very, and I mean very pro-Israel. He is definitely like all about Israel in terms of not only this situation, but overall in being our ally and all that. So again, I want you to listen to this knowing that this is coming from somebody who is literally the president of, Ben Shapiro's probably the president of I Stand With Israel, but Charlie is definitely the vice president. So give this a listen. PBD asks him a question, and then that's Charlie responding.
How did these guys not know this was taking place?
So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes.
Wow.
6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by reports, 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours.
That's suspect. Go ahead, Rob.
It's also not like a right-wing reporting. This is from the New York Times. The long wait for help as massacre unfolds in Israel.
9
I can't think of a more liberal news outlet than the New York Times.
And by the way, I'm actually very pro-Israel. So let me be so I'm not exactly.
Well, I think we all are.
No, I just want to make sure my position is clear here. But so Patrick, there are other explanations. It's possible that the Netanyahu government was double-crossed by bad agents. Okay? That's dark, but it's not as dark as what we're talking about. Okay? Another aspect is that Netanyahu might have traitors in his government, like legitimate traitors that have infiltrated. I was texting with some senior people in the IDF, and they said, Charlie, I can't say too much, but let's just say the same problem you have with the left in America, we have here in Israel. So there's something to think about. Just something to think about, right? Is that maybe there's some people within those intel agencies that aren't as sympathetic. Or maybe, Patrick, they might have gotten a tip. They might have gotten whispers, but no one thought it would be 1,200 Jews dead. That's a potential, right?
Wow, that definitely was a lot. So anyway, these guys are way more dialed in than I am. And again, this is coming from Charlie, who, just for summary, is incredibly pro-Israel. You heard him say it himself. And then secondly, a big, big Republican conservative voice. Third, hated by Democrats and liberals. And fourth, seemingly championing as one of the champions of the I Stand With Israel for the aforementioned Democrat liberals that hate him. It's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. So the other thing really quick I want to touch on, again, Benjamin Netanyahu, they call him Bibi, the prime minister of Israel. Remember, this guy is Israeli Trump. This guy is far right conservative. So this is another disconnect. Again, you've got a guy that's leading Israel who, it would be like all of the liberal Democrats in other countries. All of a sudden something happens and they're supporting Trump here in the United States. That's the comparison. So again, there is that disconnect with, I guess you would say, American Jewish people who are Democrats, and then they stand with Israel. But then the leader of their country or their homeland, or whom they are standing with, he is the exact opposite of kind of their views in general, and then their views here in the United States. So again, that's that discrepancy I was talking about. But Netanyahu, really over the past 6 months or so, has come under extreme fire within Israel, even, as he really wanted to kind of railroad and revamp their entire Supreme Court judicial system, which, based on the stuff I read, is very liberal. And he basically wanted to completely make it almost like a step arm of his rule and make it super conservative. So, okay, so let me do you one better than my layman's explanation that I just provided. So I actually found a 60 Minutes segment with Leslie Stahl, and it looks like this aired in September of this year. So literally a month ago. And they traveled to Jerusalem because, again, this Supreme Court, uprising was a big deal in Israel. Even though I do remember hearing about it here on the news, but again, I can't remember thinking it was that big of a deal because, again, I didn't hear that much about it. But give this a listen. This is 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, literally from practically 1 month ago to the day.
This week on 60 Minutes, we traveled to Israel to report on the historic protests against the Netanyahu government's proposed judicial overhaul. This legislation would weaken the Supreme Court's power, eliminating checks and balances put upon the government's authority. We arrived in the Middle East in the dead of August, but the sweltering heat didn't stop the tens of thousands of Israelis from spending their Saturdays taking to the streets in protest. In fact, it was so crowded, we even lost our crew a few times. We spent some time with the Brothers and Sisters in Arms, a group of Israeli army reservists who stopped showing up for duty and are now fighting what they call a war within the country. Did you ever dream that you'd be doing this within the society?
Never. Not even 9 months ago, not even 3 months ago. And it's a situation that is deteriorating so fast, we could never believe.
Ron Scherf is one of the founding members and leaders of Brothers and Sisters in Arms. He spent 33 years in the military, including as a Special Forces commander.
So again, I just want to emphasize that this is very recent. And by the way, as Charlie Kirk said in his interview, what that uprising, obviously it's gone now. Okay. That uprising is gone. All right. Let's listen to the rest of this.
We're defending Israel against danger. And now the danger is from inside. That's what we feel.
Does it kind of break your heart?
Yes, much so, yes.
Members of the group brought their skills, common military backgrounds, and extreme dedication to the cause. Ron, you're one of the founders of Brothers in Arms. You're one of the leaders now. How much time are you spending on this?
I'm spending 80% in my job and 80% in the protest. That's what I say.
All right, I'm going to end his take there. Man, that guy summed up my life. It's like 80% of my time is on this podcast and 80% of my time is running Boost. Man, that was pretty similar. Okay, if you want to listen to the rest of what he said, you can find the clip. But let me play for you, because you always have to hear both sides. So here is Leslie Stahl's second half of the interview where she's interviewing the person in charge of this judicial overhaul that I think this guy's like Netanyahu's maybe right-hand guy, or at least he's the one in charge of this judicial overhaul. Give this a listen.
We spoke with the architect of the judicial overhaul, Yariv Levin. He's the Justice Minister and Vice Prime Minister of Israel, and he says this judicial reform is necessary in order to rein in a judiciary that has too much power. The protesters say that you are destroying democracy in Israel. What is your response?
Of course, I respect the opinions of those who are seeing my reform as something that could do any harm, but I can assure you that the fears are completely baseless. Current situation in Israel is the judicial system is completely controlled by a group, an allied group. More than half of the Israeli population finds itself as if the judicial system is something that is almost against them.
That dude sounded like Count Dracula or like a vampire. He's like, I want to suck your blood. I want to revise the judicial system. All right. Anyway, lastly, let's hear Leslie Stahl's summary because this is pretty interesting.
The Supreme Court held a hearing on the judicial overhaul last week, but a ruling is not expected for weeks or even months. And so the brothers and sisters in arms will continue to protest.
I'm fighting for the right of my children to live here in the future. And for my parents who are worried that the miracle that they were part of building is going to be destroyed. And I'm afraid of unlimited power by the government. This is what's driving me.
All right, you know what? I'm going to end today here. We're at like 23 minutes. I think that's good. But the takeaway, and really, I think this was important to cover what was taking place in Israel prior to basically last Saturday. Okay? What was taking place in Israel prior to last Saturday. And again, when I say taking place, I mean, this was a big deal. This wasn't like a small little thing. This was a major thing. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Call a spade, and talk to you soon.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.